like to understand your motivation. So forgive me for asking, like a little bit provocatively. Um,
You're forgiven. Last time you were, I liked the provocation last time.
Oh, very good.
Forgiven.
You're one of those who have always spoken out about against Hezbollah, and you are also speaking out in regards to disarmament. Um, you want disarmament to happen, and I want to understand why is it necessary? Why is it necessary for the country? Why is this so important to you?
With your permission, I'll just nuance the first part of your question. I'm not against Hezbollah. I'm not against even members of the group, or for that matter, I'm not against anyone that will vote for them in elections next year. That's not my problem. The problem is what Hezbollah has been able to do to prevent the Lebanese state from functioning, which translates into its security capabilities. On one side of that is its weapons. It's also its sub-state infrastructure in the country that has harmed Lebanese. Weapons pointed at Israel, weapons used within Lebanon, weapons that have killed Syrians, weapons that can turn Lebanon into a battlefield. And that's what I'm challenging day in, day out. Not against Hezbollah, because I think that simplifies it, it oversimplifies it, and it turns it into, I think, almost a binary discussion. You're either with or against. But to answer the second part of your question, I can't imagine a country functioning without an end to this burden. And I don't think Lebanon is special. I can't see any country with this kind of arrangement succeeding, as long as this status quo remains. But that said, Hezbollah today is very different than Hezbollah last year. And the last time we spoke was in the middle of a war that we saw that group getting hit very hard. Today, Hezbollah is weaker. It is degraded. But it's still a militia, and it's still an Iranian-backed militia, and it still poses a challenge to Lebanon's long-term recovery. I'm on the side of the Lebanese state recovering. If I'm supporting any side, it's that side.
So what do you want them to not be capable of anymore?
The destruction that they brought to this part of the world that no other group could even dream of, and that includes, if you want to go back in time, chasing international peacekeepers away from Lebanon, blowing up embassies, blowing up barracks, targeting fellow Lebanese in the 1980s, targeting Lebanese in the 90s and 2000s in ways that got worse and worse. And what I mean by that is that it became far more easier for Hezbollah to leverage itself through violence. And that became, unfortunately, one of targeted killings and political assassinations. The most striking one we talk about is Rafiq Hariri in 2005. But there's a long list of Lebanese from all walks of life killed by this group. That has to stop. Otherwise, no country can recover when its reform-minded leaders are killed one by one. And it's not just prime ministers, it's journalists, intelligence officials, economists, diplomats, all types. That's one chapter. The other chapter is its relations to regimes that seek survivability on Lebanon's terms. What I mean by that, the Syrian regime lasted longer than it should have. The Iranian regime is surviving rather than being overthrown, thanks to this type of arrangement that exists here. It's not the only reason, but it's a fundamental reason. It also shows why Iran cannot negotiate Hezbollah. Iran can negotiate nuclear weapons. It can't negotiate Hezbollah even until today. It may change. We may see a negotiation soon. We may see that emerge. But up until now, Iran has not indicated one time it's ready to let go. That's how essential it is to Iran. And you can take it further. All types of proxy militias with Iranian sponsorship have either been trained or in alliance with Hezbollah in the last decade, if not longer. That can turn the region upside down. It does not mean all of Hezbollah's opponents are angels. And I'm not one to even opened the door to that story. I don't care about its opponents in places that don't relate to me. What I care about is Lebanon. And Lebanon cannot have this kind of burden here. If it persists, I think Lebanon is a failed state. If it doesn't persist, you can then begin to rework the country in a way that makes sense.
So it's a domination of a country through weapons and...
It's definitely not politics. Politics is not interesting with Hezbollah. Politics is parliamentary legislation and municipal decision making and social welfare. That's not interesting. Nobody would talk about Hezbollah if it was just another Lebanese group. For that matter, Hezbollah may be above certain Lebanese groups when it comes to that. They may be reasonable on corruption. They may be more transparent when it comes to politics. But who cares about that? You're not here to talk about that. You're talking about a violent machine that has really turned Lebanon upside down.
In the past couple of months, when I talked to them, I even, without them saying it, but I felt like this war was even too much for them, or for many of them. Like, why did we start this in the middle of the mess that we are in? This was the feeling that I got all the time when I talked to them. So how deeply ingrained is this feeling of enough? We're tired of it. We want to live in a normal country. How many people do think like you in this country?
You probably have more interactions with the group's members than I do, but I would put money on this that nationwide there was no appetite for the war last year, and no one voted for this war, and it was an unpopular war, whether it's within Hezbollah's ranks or outside. So I sense there's commonality there, and clearly Hezbollah lost. Maybe that's not something that will translate into rhetoric. You may not see Hezbollah ever saying that. On the contrary, you've seen language that hints otherwise, that the battle has yet to come, and the battle is now within Lebanon. But that said, that war permanently changed Hezbollah. And it's not just the commanders that were killed, it's not just the pager attack 1 week before Hassan Nasrallah's killing. It's not just that. It's that the capabilities and what was lost cannot easily be recovered. This militia doesn't have access to parts of Lebanon that it once depended on, whether it's points of entry, whether it's the airport or otherwise, or even, for that matter, the border with Syria. All of that has changed. And it has changed in a way that is bad for that group. It's not just the group losing its weapons, it's losing a lot of its capabilities that extend beyond Lebanon. It has lost that. It may recover a bit of it in South America. You may see drug trade succeeding there, but I don't think Lebanon can easily be won again by this group.
What has changed in this country that this idea of disarmament is suddenly so seriously debated? Where's this momentum coming from?
It's been seriously debated since the end of the Civil War. I don't think it's anything new. What has changed is that the possibility is there. The discussion has been ongoing for 33 years on how to disarm the last Lebanese militia. A phase of that journey was language, calling it a resistance group, until the Israelis left. When the Israelis left, there was not much justification left. You always hear about slivers of real estate along the border that became the raison d'etre for that group, whether it's the Sheba farms or other places, but that's justification. That's not really a cause anymore. But the debate has been ongoing for a long time, and it's been heated. What has changed is that the Lebanese government, just a few weeks ago, for the first time, spelled out its intention to disarm the group. That's different. It's become political, not just in civil society corners or opposition corners, or even for that matter, governments that come and go. Hezbollah cannot overthrow this government today. And if it tries, I think it would fail. That's changed. I'll add to that. Deadlines don't usually happen in this country. The current government has spelled out 2 deadlines. End of this month for a proposal by the army for the end of the year to disarm Hezbollah and all sub-state groups. Whether this succeeds or not, I think is separate. But the intention is new, a serious intention to disarm the group.
And the resolution was more serious than ever because of the opportunity that presents itself. Or is it also this overwhelming feeling of, I want to live in a world?
No, I think unfortunately it's the other end. Constant international attention and pressure that's very focused for the moment has succeeded in pushing the Lebanese government to make decisions it's uncomfortable with. I think that's the story. But that's okay. It's pushing the government to do something it said it wanted to do in January. And it's, if I can add one thing, something else has changed because Hezbollah is so much weaker. Even when international attention is on Lebanon, there's been a divorce from Hezbollah and Israel. That now Hezbollah looks less and less as a threat to Israel and more a burden to Lebanon. This is new. So you have American officials that come and go saying that Hezbollah is an internal issue. This is brand new. For the last 40 years, nobody referred to Hezbollah as an internal issue.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And if they did, it was Hezbollah.
Yeah.
For justification. Now it's the other side saying, look how weak the group has become.
Yeah. How do you reply to those who say, without Hezbollah, we don't have a deterrent against Israel?
My heart is not so harsh on people with good intentions. I can imagine if I was living in Northern Ireland in the 1970s, many Northern Irish citizens would talk about the IRA in similar ways. And I don't think it's fair to blame them for circumstance. You can even go further. I think up until recently, Colombians were talking about the FARC group in ways that there's almost a sympathetic ear, especially if you're not there. The Balkans, Serbs, Croats, Bosniaks, all discussed their fate in similar ways. Yet, all of those stories ended. Lebanon has the same burden. Lebanese can justify whatever they want. It doesn't mean it should persist. And I think it can be both. You can be emotionally attached to an idea, and you can also move on from it. And the same person can evolve too. And if I could add one thing, because Lebanon is rich in militias in its history, other Lebanese militias are today voicing their opposition to rearmament. The same type of person can completely change their opinion. It's not unique to Hezbollah.
What would Hezbollah without arms be? I mean, would it be a political party? Would it be?
That's a good question. It's never been tested. I think it would be a permanent political party, but it's hard to see what it evolves into. It could be a group that loses in the beginning and then gains again later through politics. But I don't think there's any erasing of this group. That's too far-fetched. Even in those other circumstances, all those groups turned into political parties. And I think the most successful example is the IRA. What is it? Sinn Féin? Is that the name of the group? Hezbollah can be, and they're popular. Sinn Féin wins. I don't see why a disarmed Hezbollah cannot do politics seriously and win. I don't see that as a burden. The Lebanese forces 35 years ago fought the Lebanese army under Michel Aoun as a commander-in-chief. He tried to disarm the Lebanese forces. 35 years later, the Lebanese forces is a parliamentary bloc that dictates a lot of things happening in power right now. That's a success story. They're not the Lebanese forces with weapons. They're Lebanese forces with with politics. I'd like to see Hezbollah join them in that pursuit.
What options do they have? According to which playbook or strategy are they acting right now?
I was having this discussion last night. That's a good question. The options are limited. I think you can have a difference between the sound of what Hezbollah is saying and the signal of what Iran is indicating, and they conflict with each other. I don't think Hezbollah is capable of repeating what it did in 2006, what it did in 2008, by delegitimizing governments, by overthrowing governments. I don't think that can happen today. So there's a restriction. Yet, Naim Qassem talks about the battle to end all battles. He talks about Armageddon, Karbala, and all things that wouldn't come out of him otherwise. So you have this dichotomy. I think they're restricted more than they would like to admit. And I think even if they're not ready to disarm, and even if Iran is not ready to let go, I have a very good feeling the end is coming. And I think Hezbollah will slowly adjust to that. It may not happen within deadlines, but I don't think it serves Iran's interests anymore. And that is a different Hezbollah, one that is really just Lebanese. On the other end, Iran. Larijani, Ali Larijani, was just here a few days ago. He's become the de facto leader of that group. There's no Hassan Nasrallah, there's no one to represent the group in a serious way. You have MPs in parliament. You have Muhammad Raad who talks, you have Naim Qassem, who's probably in Iran. But there's no effective leadership. They're all dead. Hashim Safiuddin was killed a day or two after Hassan Nasrallah. And everyone else that could have taken over is gone. Iran is talking on Hezbollah's behalf. What Iran wants, I think it's too premature. I don't think we're there yet. And I have a feeling this has less to do with us. It probably has more to do with regional issues that I would assume include the Americans in long-term discussions.
But would Iran ever let go of Hezbollah?
That is the right question, and maybe the Iranian regime has not found a way to survive effectively without this type of destabilizing force in the region. If they find a way, they may not need Hezbollah. But I don't know. I really don't know. This probably has less to do with overt discussions and more to do with quiet diplomacy. Maybe not as sophisticated as track 2 diplomacy, but I think those are the quiet discussions that Iranian officials will have. And I'll add to that, I'm not an expert on Iran. I claim no expertise on Hezbollah either. But I will say, clearly there's not one center of power in Iran. And clearly there's not one voice. And clearly it's increasingly become a militaristic regime. But that doesn't mean it's only that. And you may see voices that would like to move on from Hezbollah. This could happen soon. It could happen later. But Iran, I don't think, can hold on much longer. It's a burden, and it doesn't work. It can't do what Iran would like it to do. What's the point of holding on?
But to come back again to the threats of Naim Qassem, would you say it's just a ploy, or just to scare but not to act, or how do you see it?
Naim Qassem today is, I think he's become more of an online influencer than a militia leader or a political figure. His tone is so aggressive, it's almost like a YouTube provocateur yelling at us. I don't think it's the right thing to take him too seriously when he talks about destroying Lebanon in the process. That kind of rhetoric is just too far-fetched. And I would add something. Even Hezbollah members or supporters or sympathizers don't really care for him. He's allowed to express himself his way. That's why I differentiate between sound and signal. The signal is not the destruction of Lebanon. The signal, I think, has more to do with diplomacy and less to do with war.
Okay.
MashaAllah. ممكن يبقى نعلي صوتنا شويه عشان مش عايز اقفل التكييف عشان الحر.
أكيد
لا
أكيد.
صوتك انت بس يعني.
Yeah, sure. Should I talk more
لا
into the microphone?
لا لا
No,
زي
no,
ما
it's
انت
okay.
بس نعلي صوتك.
معلش إذا بس شربت
آه.
Yeah, thanks.
It's okay.
Okay.
So the question that comes up, like every day, when here is like, can violence really be avoided? You know, it's because I see this pressure cooker, and I see that either you have it here inside the country, or you have more of the violence from outside, more attacks. So this is like how do you see the perspective of, and how feasible is this avoiding violence? Or how much tension do you see right now?
Maybe I'll answer it in a way I understand.
Yeah.
The threat of civil war is 0%. If that's where violence is coming from, the fear of civil war, I think it's at 0%. And the reason I'm being extreme here, civil war requires 2 militias, not 1. Civil war will not happen with the Lebanese army. It'll happen with another militia. There's no other militia. Lebanon's experience with civil war is when the Lebanese army was obtuse to the conflict. That's 1975. That's when more than one militia are battling it out on the streets of Beirut. That's the real anarchy that can lead to 15 years of war and occupations and permanent decline. We're not there. There's no other competing security force other than the Lebanese army. The Lebanese army is not going to break down anytime soon. And you will not have a splinter group anytime soon. So that, I can dismiss that outright. The threat of violence, I think, has less to do within Lebanon, more to do with Israel. And I think patience is wearing thin. And it's not because I have any sympathy for what they would like to see. On the contrary. But I know for sure that if Hezbollah is not disarmed, and if there's a chance of it retaining any sub-state infrastructure that can be used against Israel for Iran's concerns, I see the Israelis bombing more and more. And they bombed last night. And they could bomb tonight. They could bomb today. That's violence. Even if it's targeted, even if it's surgical, and even if the Israelis come up with ways to define it that almost sound like a first aid kit, it prevents Lebanon from recovering. That hurts the economy, it destroys tourism. Any chance of having a normal summer season is thrown out the window. It sounds superficial, but it means something. Lebanon needs money. And that kind of dependency on stability, stability not in a bad sense, stability in a long-term, reform-minded sense. This Israeli campaign can destroy that too. So violence is there, I think. I don't see Lebanese going to war against each other anytime soon. I don't see it. If the threat was there, the threat would have matured, the threat would have turned into a real war, and it would have destroyed Lebanon the last 20-some years, as Hezbollah grew and grew.
Okay, but the flaring up of the war,
Flaring up.
that the war becomes more intense than just surgical operations?
Yeah, I agree. That's where the threat is. I think that can destroy Lebanon. Yeah, destroy it meaning a permanent failed state. I see that as a real threat. That's why this is a serious problem. It's not something that can be dismissed. That's where the pressure is coming from. The international attention is not long-term, it's short-term. And there's already been indications that once that attention fades, the Israelis can get away with pretty much anything they want. That's not good for the survivability of the Lebanese state.
Okay, and what do the current Israeli attacks mean for the stability of the Lebanese government?
Any attack on Lebanese soil is a problem for the Lebanese state. If it's coming from Israel or elsewhere, it's a threat to the recovery of the Lebanese state. But the pressure has actually done something which I think is meaningful. It's put the burden on the Lebanese government to handle this problem. 2 weeks ago, the Lebanese government was shy. the Lebanese president, had indicated dialogue with Hezbollah would be the preferred path. The dialogue didn't produce anything. Whether you blame Hezbollah or not on that is secondary. The Prime Minister and the cabinet made it their burden. This is the success story. Either they succeed or they fail. And I think they've done the right decision there. But this is a short-lived scenario, and I think the Israelis could escalate if they see no progress. And I'm careful here. The Lebanese government doesn't have a magic wand. It can't just go into weapons depots and say, all of this is ours now. It's not going to work like that. And the Lebanese army cannot battle or perceive to be battling Lebanese citizens. So it's not going to happen, I think, through killings. I think it'll happen quietly. And that kind of quiet, I don't know how it looks like, but I can imagine it being phases of disarmament. South of the Litani, just north of the Litani, towards Saida, perhaps a very complicated phase for Beirut. But it will not happen overnight. It has to be slow and careful. And I think that's correct. This is not a normal Lebanese militia. This is a huge Iranian project. The one missing component is what Iran would do to preserve it. And if they're interested in preserving Hezbollah, it means the regime is betting on something huge, which is a bad ending. I don't want that to be the story. I would rather engage them for something in return rather than betting on rebuilding this group later. And I think that's happening. I think this is why Larijani visited. Not just Lebanon, but Iraq too.
Okay, so you get the sense out of his visit that it's not like, no, you have to actually fulfill the role that you had like a year ago.
There's a sign of being stubborn to the point of we will never accept Hezbollah's disarmament. Other figures have said this is a bad decision by the Lebanese government from Iran. And at the same time, a willingness to accept Lebanese state authority. I see that as an openness. And I don't think it's certain that they're willing to completely bend backwards to hold on to Hezbollah. I don't know if that's true. I see this as a change. I am positive, optimistic. Sorry, I am optimistic. I'm never positive. I'm optimistic that the end is near. I feel it in my bones. I feel it. I think we will live long enough to see the end of this abnormality.
Okay, but that means also that you have to create a new identity for yourself and maybe the psychological bond.
It would have meant, I think, Hassan Nasrallah would have to let go of what he's depended on. That never happened, though. At the end of the day, it looked like this group was married to Iran's interests. Maybe autonomous in Lebanese ways, but not autonomous in regional ways. But I would have liked to see a Hezbollah that evolved without war. I'm not a big fan of identity discussions. Identity, I don't care if Hezbollah believes in a certain version of Islam that's completely contrast to other versions of it, or Christian interpretation. I don't care about that stuff. You have people in countries that have all types of identities and in countries that work too. I don't think it's about identity. It's about what the group could look like without Iran. We're seeing that play out right now, except through war. And we're seeing it diminished and weakened and less influential. So in a way, it ends in the same place. It's not married to Iran's interests. I think that would have been the best option, that Hezbollah or Hassan Nasrallah, in a way, completely turns to Lebanon. Instead, we had him living 18, 19 floors beneath the surface, rarely showing his face in public, his rhetoric becoming less and less meaningful to Lebanese, and joining a war that was suicidal. That's unfortunately the end for that group. And it ends with the group being very weakened and out of place. But unfortunately, the alternative version never took hold. That's what a lot of people would have wanted to see happen. Nobody was pushing for war with Hezbollah. Not here. The Israelis were, but Lebanese were not pushing for war.
The last question that I have is like this bond between the, let's say, the Shia and the party. I mean, this economic role and the social role. How can the state, instead of the party, how can the state fulfill this role? Is that possible at all?
All the money that is supposed to come into the country is now dependent on the disarmament of the group. It's a precondition. It comes in, I think, in the end, without the group being able to all indications are Lebanon is not going to be rebuilt if Hezbollah remains an armed party, unlike 2006. So I think it's now dependent on the group not being involved. That said, Hezbollah's key ally, Amal, and Nabih Berri, Speaker of Parliament, is heavily involved. And I think you can argue all the problems that exist there, but I don't think Hezbollah can take advantage of this. And if it tries to, we won't have money. That's in a way, I don't know what the phrase is, a catch-22, maybe? That's the right phrase? That the group's base needs money. Iran is not paying. Hezbollah is weak and cannot afford to rebuild on its own. What are you going to do? You have to let the Lebanese state do things that Hezbollah was very uncomfortable with before. And we're seeing it happen slowly in the south. And we're seeing it actually, to a degree, work. I'll add one thing. The south was obliterated. It's not just a few villages that were destroyed. South Lebanon has been destroyed. Some villages entirely. And bunkers blown up beneath the villages. This is not something you can rebuild overnight. You need a lot of money. We need that money, and they need that money. They need it somehow. And the guarantee is, I think, Hezbollah's disarmament. Ask me the same questions 5 years from now. If international attention is over, and Iran focuses in on Lebanon, and steers the group into a very violent path, you could see a fractured, divorced country. But I think even then, within those divorced sections, Hezbollah will never have influence again. I don't like that option, but I think it's over. It's over for the group hijacking Lebanon.